Hello there everybody, Dodgy Gamer here, welcome back to the channel and welcome to a new episode, episode 6 of Newgen Nation, the FM19 experiment in which we have transported the clubs of PSG, Barcelona and Manchester United to Qatar and Marseille, Real Madrid and Man City to the UAE. We've kept them in their respective leagues, we've just moved everything else, their stadium, their training ground, their youth facilities over there. Why? So their new gens, their new youth players come through with the nationality of those two nations and we see if we can improve their fortunes on the world stage. So in today's episode we're going to have one final look at the players. It's 20 years since the experiment started. We're going to have a look how our teams did at the latest World Cup. They have been qualifying for World Cups. Have they made it past the group stage this time? They've been getting to like the second round quarterfinals of the Asian Cup. Have they managed to go further? And how are those two wonderkid players that we saw last time getting along? First, we're going to check in on Johar Musabe Ahmed, who last time we saw had come through at Marseille and he just transferred to Liverpool. And now we see here 24 years of age, 79 caps for the Emirates and 8 goals. And he looks like a very accomplished defender, fantastic physical stats, very strong mental stats as well. He's got the heading, the marking and the tackling to be a tough Premier League defender. We can see he can play across defence. He can also play now in defensive midfield as well. So he's kind of widened his repertoire a bit. If we look at his history for Liverpool, we see since that £19 million transfer, he's played very regularly for Liverpool. Top in 30 games most seasons, and the one season he didn't, he still played 29 times in the league. He's been playing in Europe. He's been playing in the Cups as well. I'll just click through and you can work out his stats from the bottom here. But each season averaging in the high sixes, 6.7 and above. So he's been a solid player, I think, for Liverpool. Milestones-wise, though, we see no trophies. Lots of recognition, lots of teams of the week, lots of seasonal best 11s for club and country. But so far for Liverpool, he's just got a runners-up medal in the Carabao Cup back in 2035. But he's still got time to add trophies and medals to his cabinet. So we've had that one superstar come out of Marseille, but we haven't had a lot else come out. You see the other players are kind of average, lots of them still in the Marseille youth setup, some of them moving on to smaller teams in France, Chambly and Andrézieux, for example. So they've had that one standout player, but that's been about it. We'll take a look at this kid, Mohamed Abdullah, who's now back in the UAE. So we can see a striker, 11 caps, but just the one goal, so I guess they've perhaps been using him in his winger position. So spent some time in Marseille reserves before transferring back to the UAE, where he's been getting more game time, but looks like he's had a shocker in this most recent season, 11 appearances and a 5.35. Not the kind of player we've been hoping to see. We've also got Ahmed Saad, another striker. Now this guy's got a bit more promise if we look at his international stats. 10 caps and 11 goals so far for the UAE. So that's a really good start to his international career. Commanding player, commanding presence physically, and he's got decent mental stats to start off with. Determination could do with a bit of a boost, of course. And he's got the makings of, with time and development, he could be a decent striker, I think. If we look at his career stats, he spent the whole time at Marseille. He has actually played for the first team. He's yet to score for them in the league, though. Although we see here in the 2036-37 season, he did actually get a goal in a substitute appearance in Europe. And nothing in this last season. He's probably a player who could do with a loan move. And if he can get a loan move through or a move to another club, he's got the potential to develop into a decent player. Looking now at our players who've come through Real Madrid, Sultan Mohamed has retired. He retired a couple of years ago. So unfortunately, we don't get a chance to check in on him this time. And apart from him, well, we're looking at a couple of promising younger players here. We've got this Mohamed Abdullah Juma, who's come through recently, 19 years old. Right winger, 9 caps already and 2 goals for the Emirates. And again, much like Ahmed Saad over at Marseille, I think there's a potential here for him to be a very good player. It's just a matter of where's he going to get his game time. We see he's had a season on loan at Jaén in the Segunda Division B, 33 appearances there, so some pretty regular football. He did actually play in La Liga for Real Madrid, 2 substitute appearances. He also played in the Cup and he had a substitute appearance in Europe. Nothing to set the world alight, but he did actually get some game time in the first team. He then had pretty regular appearances for Castilla that season. Not so much in the last season, although he did turn out once again for Real Madrid in the league with a 7.0, so that's pretty good, and plenty of game time in the Cups and in Europe as well, so perhaps there's potential there. Rashid Ali Al-Hosseini, centre-back, 10 caps and 1 goal so far. He hasn't left Madrid yet. He's been at Castilla the whole time. He's also made appearances, 6 appearances last season for the Real Madrid first team, but a 6.38 rating, so not the best, but hopefully there's potential for him to develop. We also have a couple of players here at Parma and Mallorca, but we have to remind ourselves this is Parma and Mallorca 20 years into the future. So Mohamed Saleh, Mo Salah, we can call him, central defender. Look at that, 119 caps he's had now by 31 years of age. Now, he spent a lot of time in Castilla, went to Krasnodar in Russia, then free transfer to Southend. He dropped down to League One, but he had a good few seasons there and then moved on a free to Italy and Parma in Serie B, so he's making a name for himself. And Abdullah Al-Balushi at Mallorca, 77 caps and 1 goal for the centre-back at 25 years of age, so that's pretty decent. If we look here, he had a couple of spells out on loan. He had a good season at Huesca in La Liga 2, and Reus in La Liga 2, Almeria, Lugo, before eventually transferring to Cordoba, where he had 2 seasons as a regular starter, just transferred to Mallorca, also in La Liga 2. Let's see, will he ever make it to La Liga 1? And the final stop, the most frustrating stop on this experimental tour, is Manchester City. If you remember last time, we were looking at all these players who'd come through and looked very good talents, but were declaring themselves as English. The top one amongst those, Mohamed Ali Rashid, you see, he's now at Tottenham. He was at Villa last time we checked. Valued at £20 million on £74,000 a week. So obviously a valued player. 28 years of old, but still calling himself English. He's never played for England. He's played for the under-21s, but never been capped for the senior team. He could have been a really good player for UAE. He would have been a star of the team. I doubt he's going to join them now, especially as the World Cup's just passed. That might have been the time that he tried to get himself in. We see he's wanted. He's wanted by Brighton on a transfer. If we have a look at his career stats, so last time we checked him, he transferred to Aston Villa, so 3 seasons there. He was fairly regular in the team. Then his first season at Tottenham, he played 23 matches, so a lot of appearances there, but only 2 appearances this last season. Wondering if he got injured. Yeah, he had a major injury at the start of last season, a torn back muscle, kept him out for 6 weeks, and then he probably struggled to get back into the first team squad. Milestones-wise, we see he's won the Premier League International Cup, been a runner-up in the Europa League, and with the England under-20s, he won the European under-20 Elite League, but I just wish he'd turned out for UAE. And there's more of them. We've got a central defender, Hamad Al Maktoum, now at Legans, 9.5 million he's worth. You see, he spent lots of time out on loan in Spain. But again, he's just not declaring himself yet. We've got Salem Al-Hosseini, who's now at Notts County in the Championship. So he's going to have his 3rd season on loan with them, so he's been getting regular Championship level football over the last 2 years, but he's holding out for the England team. We've got Khalid Ali Al-Azam at Betis. He's now 28 years old. He's spent a lot of time with them. I think if we just check his career stats, he has several seasons with Betis. Regular, both in La Liga and La Liga 2. But again, he's never going to play for England. He could have been playing for the UAE. We do have a couple of them here. We've got this guy, Omar Mohamed Abdullah, who actually has returned to the UAE to play for Al Wahda. 22 years old, 29 caps and 3 goals. So good on you. Good on you, lad, for, representing the country of your birth. And then Khalid Mohammed Saeed. He is a striker, 52 caps now and 14 goals. He's at Al-Wasi. So we can see there he made the transfer from Man City and he's been fairly regular. Hasn't been scoring much at club level, but has been scoring at international level. again, good on you. Unfortunately, the Man City side of the experiment seems to have taken an unexpected turn. Over to the Qatari side of the experiment now, and we are checking out, first of all, Paris Saint-Germain. We haven't really had any big stars come out there like we have at Marseille. We've got Yahya Al-Thani, 29 years old now, on 121 caps and 18 goals. If we just have a look at him as a defensive midfielder, he's been a regular for Laval since he moved there, but I don't think he's setting the world alight there, but he's been in their seasonal best 11. He's been a solid player for them. He's the best one, I guess, to come out of PSG. We've got Adel Ali Al-Kabi at Genoa, 110 caps at 29 years of age for the attacking midfielder. And we see, if we look at his stats, he moved to Auxerre, got in on a rotation there, and has just moved on a free to Genoa. So hopefully he's going to make an impression there. Bit of a younger player here, Eid Hussein at Dijon. 21 caps and 4 goals for the attacking midfielder. He's available for loan, which perhaps suggests he hasn't been playing much. Unfortunately, he hasn't. Just 7 appearances in his 2 seasons there. And we've also got here Ibrahim Boujalouf at Brest, defensive midfielder. So it looks like a decent player. Had a decent career, mainly in Ligue 2 with Brest, but at least he's been getting regular football time. Barcelona, who've been so disappointing in this experiment with their players, and again we see nobody jumps out here as having a high value or anything. We've got Ibrahim Nasser Al-Kawari, who's currently injured, out with a sprained wrist, currently at Slovan Liberec, bit of a journeyman keeper. We've been tracking him, of course. Did spend a little bit of time at PSG. Last time we saw that he'd moved to Zurich, so he was fairly regular at Zurich, had a good few seasons there. He's just moved to Slovan Liberec, but obviously a backup there, not getting a huge amount of game time, unfortunately. This is one player, when we look at the milestones, we see he's got winners' medals. He was picked in the matchday squad as PSG won the Coupe de France and the Coupe de la Ligue in 2031. So at least he's got some medals to adorn his living room shelf. And finally, Manchester United, where we did have that talent come through last time, Khalifa Al-Kabi. He's currently at Brighton, 27 years of age now, worth £44 million and on £135,000 a week. So he's made a bit of a name for himself. 89 caps and 42 goals for Qatar, and he looks to be a very good, solid Premier League quality player. Looking at his career stats, so last time we just checked in on him having a decent season at Manchester United. Didn't play so much the following season, but then a transfer to Leicester, where he was used on a kind of rotation basis, and now he's, the last season, just 3 starts, making up those 17 appearances, so obviously being used off the bench a lot. Big money move to Brighton now, £31 million. Hopefully he'll live up to the price tag. We've also got a youngster here, Khalid Ibrahim, attacking midfielder again, already played 11 times for his country. I think he's got potential. He's certainly a strong physical player. He's got the right kind of technical stats for his role. If we look at his career, he's had 2 successful seasons on loan at Bury and Sheffield United. Hopefully another loan move in the season ahead will help him develop just that little bit more. We've also got Abdulaziz Hassan Musa, 32 years of old. Look at that. 153 caps and 82 goals for the striker. A real legend for the Qatari team. We see he spent most of his career in the Qatari domestic league. Never really got into high scoring totals for them in the league, but has been a legend for the national side. And we'll also take a look at Ahmed Ali, a player we've tracked a little bit. 34 years old now. 142 caps. Currently at West Brom, but listed for transfer, the 34-year-old. So obviously winding his career down. And we see what a great journeyman career he's had. He spent time out on loan at League One and Championship clubs, even a little spell in the MLS. Transferred to Burnley, then Derby, Leeds, Preston and West Brom. So he's had a good run in the Premier League, although he wasn't a regular starter there. Championship has obviously been more of his level. And we see, actually, while he was at Preston, if I just find it here, runners-up in the Carabao Cup, but relegated in the same season, unfortunately. But then he got his transfer to West Brom. Lots of time there in teams of the week and so on. Not a world superstar, but a very solid player nonetheless. Time now to check in on the national team. So we start with the UAE. We see they're currently ranked 53rd in the world, so haven't really progressed much from last time. We see they've been as high as 47th, but obviously they haven't risen up the rankings perhaps in the way we would have hoped. They've got that one superstar player, Johar Musabat Ahmed. They've got decent players backing him up. I mean, if we just look at the current squad, they've got quite a mix. I mean, look at that. They've got a centre-back from Liverpool worth £51 million, playing alongside a centre-back at Bromley worth £16,000. Interesting. You'll see, of course, they've got players in here registered to Real Madrid, registered to Marseille. What do you not see here? You don't see players from Manchester City because, of course, all the decent ones there are holding out for that place in the English national side. We see here Sultan Mohammed, although he's now retired and hung up his boots. He's listed as a legend. So is Faisal Abdullah, who's also recently retired. So last time we checked in on UAE's results, they've been knocked out of the World Cup in the group stages. They then went on later that year to the West Asian Championship, and again they could not get past the group stage, picking up a win against Syria, but then a defeat to Iraq and a draw with rivals Qatar. That meant they could not get out of the group. A few weeks later, they were in action in the Asian Cup. We see there they beat Afghanistan, lost to Australia, but then beat Bahrain to get out of their group. But a tough second-round draw against China resulted in a 2-1 defeat. That was actually in Qatar, so it'll be interesting to catch up with how Qatar would have done. But then we see in their second-round World Cup qualifying group for the current 2038 World Cup cycle, in with Yemen, Vietnam, North Korea, and Pakistan. It's an impressive run of victories, and yep, indeed, they did win every single game in that qualifying pool. 8 wins out of 8, which got them into the next round, but they got a tough group there. Japan, South Korea, Australia, all in there, along with Iraq and Vietnam. But before we go into that, there was another Western Asian Championship. This time they did get out of the group stage. They won all 3 games, including a win over Qatar, as well as Iraq and Jordan. But they were beaten by the Saudis in the semi-final. And then we see they continued with a tough World Cup qualifying group. They did manage a win over Iraq and Vietnam. If we have a look at the group, well, 4th place was enough for automatic qualification. Have to say about this new World Cup format, if it does work out like this, if this is actually what happens, having 16 groups and the top 4 qualifying and the 5th going into a playoff, this is going to be quite frankly ridiculous. Now, how did they fare at the World Cup? Well, after their warm-up friendlies, they were in a group with Turkey and Mali, and we can see here an opening day defeat to Turkey, but they did manage to beat Mali. Mali having a man sent off. They got a penalty with just over 15 minutes to go, and that set up a second-round tie with Costa Rica. They did lose that one 3-1, unfortunately, but at least we got progress. They made it out of the group stage of the World Cup for the first time. On to Qatar, and we see, of course, the first team squad is full of our Newgens, again from varied clubs around the world. We've got players here at Barcelona, Crystal Palace, Manchester United, and some teams we've never heard of, and some players without a club as well. Quite a mix, it has to be said. Abdulaziz Hassan Musa still playing. He's a legend. He's a living legend in the squad with his 82 goals and his 150 caps. Fantastic stuff there. Now we see, if I just pull up the rankings for you, their current world ranking is 36 and they have been as high as 27th. So there's obviously been some good progress for Qatar. I think they didn't have that standout star player that the UAE got, but I think overall they just got a better general core of a squad to build their results around. Speaking of results, following the 2034 World Cup West Asian Championship, we already know that they drew their final group game with UAE. They'd beaten Syria but lost to Iraq, and that was not enough to get them out of the group stage. Quite a surprise, as Qatar usually make the semis or the final in this championship, but it was not to be on this occasion. They did, however, pick themselves up considerably for the Asian Cup, which they hosted. They stormed through the group, beating Vietnam, Indonesia and Saudi Arabia. They easily dispatched Jordan in the second round. They beat China, who of course knocked out the UAE. They beat China in the quarterfinal. they got a very solid, impressive-looking win with a late goal over South Korea in the semi-final to set up a final with Iran, which unfortunately they would lose in extra time, and that despite Iran playing the final 20 minutes with 10 men only. So they got so close, but unfortunately could not bag themselves a trophy. Similar story to the UAE in the World Cup qualifiers. They got Chinese Taipei, Afghanistan, Syria and Turkmenistan in their group, and yeah, indeed, they won all 8 games as they breezed through to the final qualifying stage, where they were drawn with Iran, Kuwait, China, Uzbekistan and Saudi Arabia. And by the looks of this first half of the qualifying programme, they were doing very well. They had a little break for the West Asian Championship where they beat Jordan, lost to the UAE, beat Iraq, then they beat Bahrain in the semis, but lost to Saudi Arabia in the final. So back to form in the West Asian Championship 2036 edition. Back to World Cup qualifiers. They lost to Iran again, but they bounced back with wins over Kuwait and China, draw with Uzbekistan, and a win with Saudi Arabia. That must have set up quite an easy qualification for the World Cup, and indeed it did, coming second behind Asian champions Iran as they made their way to Argentina 2038. And how did they do there? Well, they were drawn in a tough group with the hosts, got a sound thrashing in their first game, but then bounced back to beat Slovenia 3-1 and make it to the second round. Familiar opponents in the shape of South Korea. Unfortunately, they lost 2-1. This is a team, of course, that they would have beaten just 3 years previously in the Asian Cup semi-final. South Korea got their revenge this time, though. So close to further progression in the World Cup. Okay, so that's it for this episode of Newgen Nation. So we've definitely seen some progress from where we began 20 years ago. We haven't seen a flood of world-class players coming out, but we've had at least one world-class player for UAE, and we've had a decent squad built up there for Qatar, who obviously seem to be doing fairly well for themselves. What I'm planning to do now, I want to fast this forward rather than just go to the next World Cup. I'm going to bring this up to 2050. I'm thinking we'll go up to the 2050 World Cup. We'll just have a general look at how the national teams are doing, and have there been any more superstars that come out, and just we'll wrap up like what are our takeaways from this experiment. And that's something maybe you, dear viewers, can think about before the next episode. What have your takeaways from this experiment been? What surprises have come up? What things were pretty much as you would expect? Just let me know in the comments down below. And also in that bonus episode have some news about my plans for a second edition of Newgen Nation when Football Manager 2020 drops, so make sure you stay tuned for that video. I'm not sure exactly when that's going to come out because I'm going to have to holiday through, and that's going to take a bit of time. So we're probably looking at sometime next week. But for now, I'm Dodgy Gamer. Thank you so much for watching. Please hit the like button if you've enjoyed this video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. I'm Dodgy Gamer. See you again soon.